Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the RA Group Daily Webcast. Every weekday at 3:30 we will be hosting a live webcast with our panel of experts discussing a wide variety of topics to help you survive and thrive during the lockdown, including cooking demonstrations, well-being and health advice, sommelier skills, mindfulness techniques, plus education around a variety of culinary topics. Today, Sonia Carvalho, our head of coffee and culture, will be demonstrating how to cold brew for the whole family. Please feel free to ask any questions throughout the broadcast. I would love to keep this as interactive as possible. Now over to Sonia.
Hi everyone, welcome to the very first webcast, very exciting. So what I thought I'd do for you today is a really simple cold brew tea recipe. I'm going to be using rare tea today. It's just a lovely, beautiful loose leaf tea. So I'll just talk through what ingredients I've got here and then we'll brew the first part. So kind of what we're recreating is very similar version to this green mint tea here, which you can already buy blended from rare tea. Considering that we're going to be blending it ourselves today, it's just because I thought actually most people aren't going to have this particular blend in their cupboard, so I thought this would be a better way to do it. So we have a very lovely whole leaf green tea from rare tea that I'll be using, and an English peppermint, super fresh and vibrant, so they work really well. So for this particular recipe today, we're going to have lime tea. We're going to have 2 limes squeezed, juiced, and 1 lime sliced, and just in ½ litre of water, which is what you'll see here. I'd recommend that when you are brewing this, you pop it in the fridge and you leave that to brew while you prepare the tea element that goes with it. So if we just weigh that out here, so let's get our scales. A top tip when you are weighing tea, it is a lot lighter than when you'd weigh coffee or other elements like that. So I would suggest use the ramekin as a weight as opposed to tearing it at 0, just because that will help you be able to weigh as little as a gram of tea, which is what we need now for our mint. So a gram of mint tea. And now we need 3 parts green tea.
Sonia, I've got a question for you. Do you have to use limes as part of this recipe, or can you use any other fruit?
Limes work really well. Most citrus fruits work really well with tea, and I find it's just because they do sit better, so they won't disintegrate when they're in the liquid. For this particular recipe, you could use lemons. I haven't tried it with oranges, but I probably would think they'd be they'd clash with the green tea. But you can use all sorts of different citrus fruits when you're.
I have some grapefruits in the kitchen. Would that be okay?
You could do. I would probably recommend that you don't use the juice. You just slice it and infuse it that way. Just purely because I think the flavour might be a bit too intense and sour. You could as well, if you are using grapefruit, maybe experiment with using a slightly more green tea, as that would help you kind of balance the flavours a bit better. Right. But definitely try it out. So all I've done is just popped it here in my jug. I'm just going to add some water, just room temperature. And you kind of want half and half for your lime liquid and your tea infusion. You should weigh this, but I already know how much goes into this jug because I've used it a million times. And you just want to stir it and then set aside. So my scales time it for me, so I'm just going to literally set the clock. For the purposes of today, I'm just going to be setting the time for about 12 minutes. But I would recommend that when you're doing it at home, you do it for about 20. So that's set. Okay. Why are we doing cold brew? So cold brew is a really nice alternative to your standard hot brewing. And I feel that if you've got young kids at home and you want to get them involved in doing something a bit different, it's actually really nice. There's no risks of them being burnt with hot water. They could stir the fruit, help juice the fruits. So it's a really nice sort of activity that you can be doing together because there's no hot liquids involved. Why are we using loose leaf tea. I thought I'd do a little demonstration here as to the differences from using your standard paper tea bag teas versus all the way through to some lovely loose leaf like this that I'm using today.
So I've got questions coming in, if that's okay. Alice asks, which green tea do you recommend?
So for this particular recipe, I'm just using a standard green tea, but there are some really, really beautiful green teas that you could use. I think because we're blending this with mint, we kind of don't want the green tea to be too strong. What you can find sometimes is that green teas have that seaweedy note to them, which can be really delicious on their own. But when you start to blend them with other teas, it can become a bit confused. So for this blending recipe, I would recommend just the standard green tea. But if you are exploring and tasting different teas, some of those more complex tea flavors are just delicious, brewed hot with some lime or lemons. They're really, really delicious. So that's what I'd suggest if you've got some other really tasty oolongs or some different sencha teas or even matcha. I wouldn't recommend blending them in this way. So I hope that helps.
It does. And then Fatima asks, I think you partially answered this question. She says, I only have Earl Grey tea and green tea. Can I still make this?
If you have green tea, you can still make it with green tea. I'm going to show you why paper tea bag green tea probably won't work as well. But if you do have if you have a nice loose leaf or even a larger leaf green tea in a pyramid bag, you can absolutely do it, yes. Don't use the Earl Grey. Earl Grey, if you do want to, Earl Greys work really well for cold infusions as well, but they tend to they tend to work better with sort of orangey flavors. So you could do a cold brew with sliced orange. That would work super, super well. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Perfect, thank you.
So I've got a standard paper tea bag here, and so I'm just going to open it up and pour it into my ramekin. And I just wanted to show you what happens. So I don't know if you can see there, but that poured out like a really fine powder. I just wanted to show you what happens when, I'm just going to add a touch of water to it. Again, just ambient water. So when you're using something like a powdered tea bag, I don't know if you can see, but essentially you add a drop of water and it very much turns to sludge. So these are very, very fine particles, become very clumpy. And although they might be the most familiar flavour to us, because, you know, this is the standard brew that a lot of us are used to drinking with milk, when you then upgrade to something like a pyramid bag, where the leaves are slightly larger, again, I've added some water here just so you can see. So the leaves are, the particles are slightly larger, more surface area, more flavour. And then when we upgrade to something like this rare tea, which is absolutely beautiful, you can see here how large those particles are. The larger the surface area, I guess really what it will tell you is the more confident that the tea is in itself, that it's a good quality tea that's been treated with a lot of love and care. The reason that some tea bags will have this fine powder in them is that the quality of the tea being picked it comes from lower down on the plant, and the way that it's disguised, I guess, is like this, for it to be chopped up and powdered and put into a paper tea bag for you, and then it doesn't really stand on its own. So when you're doing infusions like this, I always suggest that you go with either a really good quality pyramid tea bag where you can actually visibly see everything inside it is actually really confident in itself and a reasonable size, or ideally loose leaf tea. I think that the blends that I have tried to do in the past with tea bags, just to try and make it a bit more accessible for everyone, those tea bags were actually really, really astringent. They impacted the overall flavour of the tea, so I wouldn't recommend them for any cold infusions, that's for sure.
Yeah. That perfectly answers Louise's question, because she asked, can you use tea bags? David Sims also sent us a question saying, what are the benefits of cold brewing versus traditional hot brewing?
So there's two things. When you're cold brewing a green tea like we are today, you'll actually get more of the antioxidants coming through, which is great because you extract more of the benefits of that tea without hindering any flavour, which is awesome. The other reason that it's really great to brew cold is is just the fact that it doesn't affect the flavour in the same way as hot tea. So when you infuse any tea with hot water, tannins are released, and they are almost the drying notes that you feel on your tongue when you're tasting tea. And what's really lovely about cold brew, just like with coffee, is you don't get that same bitter finish. It's a lot lighter and a lot cleaner. So I find that's really something really fascinating about tea, because it can taste completely different hot to a cold infusion.
Great. We've got some more questions, if that's okay, Sonia. What's your recommended or favourite flavour?
I think jasmine tea is absolutely stunning. I think especially the rare tea jasmine tea is beautiful. It's really great for cooking, for kombuchas. It's beautiful iced. Pop it in the fridge in some cold water overnight. The next day, absolutely stunning. As well as brewed hot. Yeah, it's just a really, really versatile tea. Love it.
All right, Sonia, Steph here. I've just got a quick question for you about Rare Tea Company. Why do you use them? Why are they sort of your go-to for loose leaf tea?
I really, really love these guys because they do so much great work in sourcing their tea, in working really closely with the farmers, making sure that the conditions there are great and they're looked after. And all the tea that we buy from Rare Tea actually goes back to the Rare Charity. Highly recommend you all check it out. Go online, have a look at the Rare Charity and the work they're doing, basically funding education back in the countries where the tea is grown, so mostly Malawi, etc. But I definitely recommend you check it out because there's a really lovely people story behind a really beautiful product, which I love.
That's awesome.
We've also got some more questions. Chelsea writes in, I have a loose leaf chai of Madagascar, rooibos, and it smells super fruity. Can I cold brew this with lemon, do you think?
So, absolutely. That tea sounds amazing. My absolute favourite for rooibos, which Steph will tell me off because I never say it right, but my absolute favourite infusion is rooibos.
Steph, how do you say it?
Rooibos.
Rooibos.
There you go. Steph says it. What I'd recommend is cold brew it, absolutely. Use sliced oranges, maybe a squeeze of orange as well in there. So maybe take one whole orange, squeeze that, and then do a cold infusion. It won't need long because it takes on it takes on so much of the flavour from it if it's a good quality tea. But my absolute go-to with Red Bush is oranges. It's beautiful, really, really stunning. And I'm more than happy if you want to reach out. I can ping you a recipe that I use at home, which works really, really well.
Fantastic. Giovanni writes in and says, can I add honey with the green tea, not being hot?
So I would suggest the reason that we use limes instead of lemons for this is because limes tend to have a little of sweetness to them as well, which I find works really well. And what I've suggested for this is to potentially add something like an agave syrup, something that doesn't really have any flavour to it. The problem that you'll have if you add honey to something like this is that it might fight a little bit with the limes. I'm not sure that the combination will work as well, just because honey is such a strong flavour. But if you can pop in something else that isn't as you know, defined as a flavour on its own, then that could kind of be masked and help to elevate the sweetness. So if you've got any sort of agave syrup, anything which is maybe a bit subtler to sweeten it, that's what I'd suggest.
Great. And Caroline asks, how long can you leave cold brew in your fridge before it's not good to drink?
So I would suggest that if you're brewing something like this, you probably just want it for a couple of days. The longer you leave your lime slices in the actual liquids, you're going to start to get a really sort of sour note from those. So I would say if you're looking to keep it in the fridge for a couple of days, then remove those lime slices out and maybe just add them fresh to your glass when you're drinking it. But the liquid itself is literally just lime juice, water and tea. So, you know, there's no hidden nasties in there. I personally really love to brew this in the morning, pop it in the fridge and then kind of drink it for lunch and in the evenings, and it's just super fresh. Not so much today because you know, it's not so hot out, but this weekend, you know, this was absolutely delicious for me because I was making a few batches this weekend. So it's one of those things I think that you should try and aim to drink within, you know, 48 hours. But again, it's only tea and juice, so you know, it hasn't got any hidden nasties in there that that will do you any harm, but I wouldn't suggest keeping it for longer than that. Hope that helps.
You add gin to that.
I was just going to ask that, Gavin.
Oh, sorry, Steph.
You can, I'll be honest, you can probably add gin to most of the recipes that I'm going to be showcasing in this webcast. You can absolutely add gin to this. Yeah, I might have to start to incorporate a sneaky little bottle of gin where I just show you how much you should add.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, absolutely, you can add gin to this and it'll be delicious. I think once if you know you're going to have it with alcohol, I'd probably recommend you really do leave the tea infusion a little bit longer, just because we've got that tendency that when we add alcohol, we obviously add ice and you might dilute the flavour slightly. So I would suggest that if you're making it with the intention that you're going to want to add some alcohol to it, then I would definitely brew the tea element a little bit longer, so maybe for about 40 minutes. And again, I'm just stirring it here just because I want to get maximum flavour out. That is something that you can do ambient. Just keep stirring and keep the surface area kind of intact.
I've got more questions, if that's okay. Which garnish can I use for the jasmine iced tea?
Oh, that's a really good question. I haven't played around with too many options, just because I think it's delicious as it is. I do tend to pop in, again, going back to my tried and tested lime, I do tend to pop in some slices of lime. But I think jasmine is such a versatile tea. You can't go wrong with some mint, but ultimately the garnish that I use for it is my lime, a slice of lime, nice and fresh, and it will just prolong that nice fresh finish that you get when you've got the cold brew jasmine. But yeah, I'll experiment with some more options and I'll let you know. I don't know if
Alice writes in, I think we may have answered this question already. Can one use the cold brew tea as a cocktail base, i.e. from 5 p.m. onwards?
Absolutely, yes. There's going to be the next tea recipe that we showcase. I was literally just discussing it with Steph because it's a take on sangria that doesn't require any wine, but spirits can be added, so it's child and adult friendly. So yeah, watch this space. But yeah, absolutely, gin can be added to any of these and works quite well. I'd say as well, if
we say it's cold brew for the whole family, there's like a kids version and then the adult version.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Love it. And Mrs. Fitz wants to know, can you add fresh ginger?
You can. I would suggest that if you're adding ginger, add it to this element. So add it to the location where you are brewing the tea, and then sieve everything in one go. So when you pop it into your actual vessel, you're straining off everything together. I wouldn't add too much, if I'm honest, just because ginger can be quite a strong flavour. I think that when you are using ginger, some of the fruity teas, not necessarily the lime-based ones, but some of the rooibos tea that we were talking about earlier with the oranges, I think that would work really well with some ginger in it, just to give it that sort of lift and that freshness. But yeah, I'd maybe experiment with using ginger in small amounts and then work your way up to what you need, just because it can be quite powerful.
Delicious.
I'm still thinking about the sangria without the wine, I have to be honest.
Honestly, it is amazing.
Can't wait.
So this has been on for about 14 minutes, so I'm just going to literally strain it off. I've got a lovely little strainer here that I use for most teas, but what I'd say is if you haven't got a strainer like this, you can use a piece of muslin cloth, anything really, to just hold all these leaves. Because we're using a good quality tea, they are quite large, so you haven't got any powdery elements seeping through.
I've got a question, Sonia.
Yeah.
Is cold brew green tea, does it have more or less antioxidants?
So it actually has more.
Yeah.
So from my reading, when green tea comes into contact with heat, as you can expect, a lot of the antioxidants can actually be harmed or not make it quite through that process. But when you're brewing cold, the really lovely thing is that all of those elements still come through. I suppose it's very similar to, you know, when you're enjoying vegetables raw as opposed to cooking them, they may lose certain nutrients. That's kind of how my brain remembers it. Yeah. So you do have more coming through with the cold infusion than you would with a hot brew. And the other really lovely thing. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I mean, there's a little bit of false advertising when green tea producers talk about the amount of antioxidants in their tea and how good it is for you.
There is still, even when you're brewing it hot, there are of course lots of antioxidants in there. It's just on a face-to-face comparison, because it's coming into contact with heat, it's obviously going to lose more than it being kind of just gently simmered in cold or ambient temperatures. So it's just that element of it. I think everybody at this time is kind of looking at, you know, what can I be drinking or eating to keep myself hydrated that's going to be good for me, and I think pairing this tea with limes works really well because they are both high in antioxidants. So I think it's just finding those pieces. Sometimes in the press there can be, as you said, Gavin, there can be a lot of misinformation. But I think if you go to the sources that you trust, you're likely to find the info the correct information. Matcha, that's, you know, everybody's always talking about how good matcha is for you. That is very good for you if you get a good quality matcha. There are a lot of lower grade matchas. There are cooking grade matchas, and there are all sorts of ones. But the higher quality, the better quality that you get of matcha, the more antioxidants are in there. So it's just about doing your research and using the suppliers that you trust, really.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, Sonia, with the antioxidants and how it sort of protects it when you cold brew, is the same for caffeine?
So cold brew, unfortunately, coffee doesn't have any antioxidants. Otherwise, I'd have a really good case for drinking as much as I drink. But the difference with caffeine in this case, sorry, was your question on caffeine?
Yes, it is on caffeine. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So when you're brewing cold brew tea versus cold brew coffee, very similar in that. Yes, you will have a different caffeine extraction. The similarities are that with tea, when you brew it cold, because it brews, sorry, the difference is because you brew cold tea in a shorter period of time. If you were to brew it for as long as you'd brew coffee, so coffee typically when you're doing a cold brew is overnight, so you're probably looking at about 17 to 20 hours for a cold brew infusion of coffee. Loads and loads of caffeine's being absorbed because obviously the coffee is in contact with the liquid for longer, and so it coaxes that level of caffeine out of it. When we're talking about tea infused or brewed for 30 minutes, you're obviously not getting the same extraction. However, there are cold brew teas that you would brew overnight. Personally, I think those would be a bit too astringent, but it is possible. I guess really the longer the liquid's in contact with the caffeine producing element, the more caffeine is going to be released. The differences between hot and cold is that sometimes the heat can destroy that caffeine element in it. And the really lovely thing about tea versus coffee when we are talking about caffeine content is that caffeine, you'll feel in your body when you drink that caffeine, you'll feel that hit. So you'll automatically feel that pick-me-up element of the caffeine. What tends to happen is you feel that drop off, and it's quite a sudden drop off of caffeine in your body, and you feel like, oh, I could use another coffee. The lovely thing about tea, the caffeine operates very differently in your body. So the caffeine in your body is released along a consistent line, a consistent period of time. So it just carries on at that level in your body. You don't feel a high peak. You just feel a sustained level of caffeine, if that makes sense. So those are sort of the main differences, I'd say, when you're looking at the caffeine content in tea and coffee.
That's fascinating.
There you go.
Thank you.
Just pouring myself a cup. And I'm serving it with mint just because I think mint and lime always works really well, and it's super fresh. And you could absolutely pop in a shot of gin and some ice, and yeah, sit in the garden and enjoy it for sure.
Ooh, that looks good.
That does.
It's delicious.
I'm very jealous.
We have a few more questions. That's okay, Sonia?
Yeah, great.
Alice asks, could you cold brew chamomile tea? And which flavors do you recommend it's paired with?
So I'm actually experimenting with chamomile at the moment. I think chamomile works well with lemon. Personally, I think that's probably the nicest infusion. The thing that you have to be careful with chamomile is just that you overbrew it. So if it's in contact for too long, I find the delicate flavors of chamomile are really what you're looking for. To Giovanni's question earlier, if you were looking to sweeten, I suggested not sweetening with honey, but actually chamomile is one of the teas that I think does work well. If you need that little bit of sweetness, to sweeten it with some honey, especially when you're brewing it cold. And again, the really nice thing about chamomile, if you're looking to maybe infuse it with some cordials, so if you've got any different cordials at home, absolutely mix those in. So instead of the lime juice like we use today, use some cordial, some fresh lemons, and some cold brew chamomile. That'd be really tasty. That's what I'd suggest.
And then Pam asks, is it true all tea comes from the same plant?
It is indeed, yes. So you would have heard there are lots of different varieties of tea, but they all come from the same plant. So as I showed you earlier, the tea bag powdered tea, that tends to be picked from lower down, so it's a lower quality of leaf on the plant. The higher you pick, the better quality leaf you get. It's exposed to more sunshine, more of the things that tea leaves love, and forces them to grow beautiful surface areas. When you maybe find something like a silver tip tea, all of the white teas, so they're picked, obviously, they're picked from a bud, so they're a smaller leaf area, but again, very expensive because they can only be picked once. So yeah, they all come from the same plant, but there's lots of different qualities of tea within that same plant, and not just that, it also highly depends on what they do to it once it's picked. So a lot of green teas are pan fried or steamed to stop oxidation, so it stops them from going black. And then obviously your black teas are oxidized. You can get some that are fermented. I mean, there's loads of things. It's very much like coffee. Once it's picked, everything you do to it from then on kind of impacts that final flavor that you get in your cup. So it's super fascinating.
That sounds very much like wine as well.
Yes. Which is why I'm so interested in wine, and I'm always asking you lots of questions.
Well, you've converted me into a tea drinker, so.
Fantastic. We don't have any more questions. Eddie just says, awesome webcast. Thank you, Sonia.
Eddie's a cool guy. Love Eddie.
Steph, do you have any questions before we wrap up?
No, I think I asked all my questions earlier. So thank you, Sonia. That was really, really cool.
Thanks.
Well, in that case, thank you very much, Sonia, for a fascinating demonstration. Our next webcast will be tomorrow at 3:30 with David Sims, our culinary director, demonstrating how to make kombucha at home. This looks to be right up your avenue, Sonia.
Yeah, definitely.
For more information about our program of discussions, please go to RA Group's website at www.ragroup.co.uk/news to download the broadcast links and recipes. And the recipe that we've been showing today from Sonia is also up there. Meanwhile, if you have any questions or suggestions about how you can get involved, please email communications@restaurantassociates, which is all one word, .co.uk. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Goodbye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.